How's it going, everyone? I'm back with another live fantasy mock draft. Difference here is that I'm actually going to be picking towards the end of the first round. Actually, I'll be right at the end. So it's another 12-man PPR league, and I've got the 12th pick. So this will be a little bit different. It'll actually be quite different from the first one that I've done, where I had the third pick overall. And I thought it would be a nice little variety in terms of who's going to be available and the thought process that goes behind picking those individual players. So as you can see, there's about 10 seconds left before we get this going. And I'm pretty lucky there's not that many people on auto draft, so I think this will be pretty accurate in terms of who you would select and when. There we go, we got it going on. So I think I'm just going to kind of narrate a little bit in terms of who's being picked where and whether I agree or don't agree with the pick. And then I won't go through the entire roster. I'll try and keep this to about a 20-minute video, and maybe I'll give a little bit more analysis than I did on the first one this time around. So unfortunately, we're waiting for this guy for his auto pick, but number one guy, David Johnson, I agree with that. I've come out with my player reviews for the most part, and that's the guy that I would take number one overall. I'd go Le'Veon next. Depending on what happens with Zeke, I would go Zeke, then Antonio. Pretty much just name off the next three receivers. I think for me, the point at which I go for a fourth running back would be after AJ Green, and I have AJ Green ranked ahead of Mike Evans, so I would probably pick AJ Green, and then Melvin Gordon, and then go back to receivers. But we'll see what happens here. I mean, I'm kind of getting insight as other people are picking at the same time, so that's the neat thing. And you see the top six picks here. I would guarantee you there's like a 95-96% chance that in all PPR leagues, hell, in all the majority of leagues, standard or PPR, this is what that top six is going to look like. Maybe this even top eight. Maybe not exactly in this order, but I feel pretty confident saying these are going to be the top eight guys that go. So we're almost nearing my pick, and it's a little bit of a double-edged sword picking back-to-back as I am here, because you have to wait so long for your next pick. I think the ideal place, the ideal thing to have would be somewhere in the middle, so you don't have to wait that long and risk having your player gone. But the nice thing is you do get to pick pretty much two players at once. And the way that this worked out, I've got my actually fourth ranked running back right here in Melvin Gordon, so I'm going to go ahead and snag him up. And then right afterwards, it's me again. I'm going to go with a receiver, because I do think that with these top receivers, they will carry your teams. And, you know, I think there is a lot of depth later on, especially with the receiver position, but I think a lot of them honestly will be gone by the time I'm picking again. That's, like I said, that's one of the unfortunate things of being all the way over with the last pick. So I'm going to go ahead, pick Jordy Nelson. I think some other options that I wouldn't have been upset with would have been getting a guy like T.Y., looking at a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, but I think that would have been way too early. At the same, I mean, I'm looking at guys that will be productive, but at the same time, I don't want to overvalue them. You have to strike a nice balance between that, between your favorites and where their actual value sits. So I kind of always try and keep that in mind. You know, as I said that, DeAndre Hopkins was ranked 20-something, but you see he just got picked 16th overall. So, I mean, in my opinion, I don't have a problem with this. Some people might say it's too high, but I like the pick. Um, if Jordan Nelson wasn't there, honestly, I probably would have looked at DeAndre Hopkins. It would have been between DeAndre and Amari Cooper. I was also actually kind of considering Rob Gronkowski a little bit, but I thought that at least Kelsey or Olsen would be at the 36th or 37th pick. Um, I've said it before again. I think a guy that everyone should have on their radars is Keenan Allen. I read a report earlier this morning that as far as his condition and his play, he's looked very good in camp, and people have been really impressed with him. So that's always a nice thing to note. And he's been there forever. So in terms of the system, he knows the system. He knows the quarterback, and it's just a matter of staying on the field for him. And I don't think he'll make it to me when I'm picking 36th, but if he's somehow there, I'm snagging him up right away. We'll see. A lot of these top guys are going to go now because you see some auto picks have been turned on, unfortunately. I try and avoid that as much as possible, but sometimes it just happens. We'll see. As far as some other kind of things that I keep an eye on, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I don't like having more than two guys on the same bye week. I think, especially if they're guys that you picked with one of your first 5 picks, that kind of takes away from the talent. I mean, I know that you can pick up guys on the waiver wire, but having 3 of your top 5 picks be out on the same bye week, I would say that gives you like a 60% chance of probably losing that week. So keep that in mind. I know sometimes if there's incredible value, you pick a player because you know he'll at least be available for the playoffs or something like that. So I don't have a problem with that if it's that kind of scenario. Like for example, if Keenan Allen is there, I will take him. Also, something that I do try and avoid a little bit, I don't like having too many skill players from the same team. So by that I mean running back and receiver and tight end. But I think you can make some exceptions with that because I think San Diego's offense is going to be very good this year. I think you could make the exception for that for teams like New England with Gronk and one of the receivers, maybe with Green Bay with Jordy and Ty Montgomery, with Zeke and Des Bryant or something like that. But you have to be very wary of this because if that respective team has a bad week, for some reason they're just not gelling, they're having a lot of turnovers, you're pretty much guaranteeing yourself a loss that week because you're going to have 2 of your starting players in your rotation most likely put up below average numbers. So that's always something to consider. It's always a matter of getting that perfect balance. And right now, as I'm looking at things, I was kind of talking and not paying too much attention at the guys that have went, but let's scroll back a little bit. I kind of had it covered until DeAndre Hopkins. You saw Gurley go. I don't really have a problem with that. Followed by Lamar Miller. I think that's the way it should be. I don't have him ranked that high, but I actually have him and Gurley ranked pretty close to each other. Marshawn Lynch, I actually would have taken before any of these guys in terms of the running backs. Also, Jordan Howard would have taken before these guys. Gronk went at 20, so that means he went in the second round. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, if he could stay healthy, if you could tell me Gronk is going to stay healthy for 16 games, I would not have a problem with that pick. Let's see who else went. After Marshawn, Christian McCaffrey went. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see where... I want to see where Leonard Fournette went. So Fournette went after... Okay. Well, perfect. So one of my tight ends went, and that was Greg Olsen. But I still have Kelsey, so what I will do is I will take Keenan Allen here, because in terms of PPR, I think he is quite valuable. Then I'll turn right around and I will pick up Travis Kelce to fill out that tight end position. And as far as how this is going right now, evaluating my picks, I would love this team if this was my actual team so far in my upcoming leagues, because in my books, I've got a top 5 running back who's a PPR threat and the primary guy there. I've got Jordy Nelson, who I think will be a top 5 receiver with Aaron Rodgers. Keenan Allen, if he stays healthy, I think he's an excellent PPR choice. And then also Travis Kelce, who I think will probably be the second best tight end. We'll see what happens. He hasn't had those injury issues. I think that with Macklin gone, he'll get a bunch of receptions, a bunch of more yards, so that'll be great. I've actually been seeing him in some of the mock drafts that I've looked at go a little bit earlier than this, so I was actually pleasantly surprised that he was here for me to pick up. And again, it's going to all go back to where individuals have their respective guys ranked. Right now, as you can see, I still need to fill out my running backs. So the way that I kind of take these things is I try to fill out my receivers and my running backs first. I don't like to go running back, or receiver, because that usually leaves my one of the other positions pretty barren. And I mean, I understand sometimes there will be no one good available, or it'll be quite a big reach, so then you make the best out of that situation and you kind of hope it works out. I've just been lucky enough here for it to kind of work out in my favor. But kind of going back, looking at some of the guys that have been taken, I said Greg Olsen was taken, and that's interesting. The person that took him values him more than Kelce. I have no problem with that. He has had over 1,000 yards the last 3 seasons, so that's I can't say anything about that. Let's see what else. I'm pretty shocked that guys like Crabtree and Pryor went before Keenan Allen. I mean, obviously not everyone is going to be as high on Keenan Allen as I am. But also Demaryius Thomas. Who's throwing Demaryius Thomas the football? Answer me that question, and then I'll be able to get behind him yet again. I agree with where Marshawn Lynch is going here. I like that spot for him, especially now that he's in Oakland. We'll see how he plays considering his time away from football. I see Crowell went right after Travis Kelce, which I think is pretty early on considering you still had guys like Brendan Cooks, let's see who else, Allen Robinson, Julian Edelman, even Aaron Rodgers. As you can see, Aaron Rodgers went in the fourth, I believe in the 4th round, yes. So I think you do not take a quarterback before the 4th round, maybe not even in the 4th round, because there are so many other quarterbacks that are going to have good years. And I think quarterback and receiver are the 2 deepest positions. I think that's usually how it is, but we'll see if I'm right with that as the season goes on, if injuries start taking effect. But so far it's coming up to me again, and some of the guys that I'm seeing, I would like to fill up my remaining running back spot, and there's 2 guys right now that I'm looking at that I wouldn't mind. You can see Ty Montgomery is here, and so is Spencer Ware. I know what I said before about not having more than one player on the same team, but if one of these guys is available, I'm gonna go ahead and pick them. If you had to, find one of the weaknesses to this team right now that I'm putting together, that would be the first thing that I look at. And I know I know some people might not value it as much as I do, but I really am wary of those situations when you have two players from the same team. And in this case, I pretty much have two pairs. I would potentially have two pairs of players like that. So that's even riskier. What else? I would also like to take a quarterback. So I see Andrew Luck there at 69. I might actually reach and go ahead and pick Luck at 61. We'll see how I value some of the flex players, because flex, I think, is a sometimes underrated but very important position. If you can fill it with a quality guy, I think that immediately separates you from some other teams in your league. I've heard a lot of good things, a lot of praise about Pierre Garçon now that he's going to San Fran, and we'll see. There's no really other main receivers there, so I could see him having a pretty good year. I'm not a fan of the quarterback situation in San Fran. We'll see what happens there. I believe it's Brian Hoyer that's quarterbacking, but I still think San Fran is very young, especially offensively, but that's just my opinion. So as you can see, the way that this is playing out, I will have my choice of one of these players that I mentioned, either Ty Montgomery or Spencer Ware. And I personally would probably pick Ty Montgomery. But and the reason I say that is because I've been hearing a lot about the running back situation in Kansas City and how Spencer Ware might lose his starting job at some point halfway through the season. So that scares me a little bit, but I've heard a lot more optimistic reports on the side of Ty Montgomery. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice on Ty Montgomery right here. As far as what other running back options I had, I don't think there's too many that I personally would have rolled with. Like I said, Spencer Ware, Frank Gore, not a bad traditional running back. You've got Theo Riddick, who's a PPR guy, but I think Ty Montgomery is better than all those guys, or has the potential at least to be better than all those guys. So like I said before, if Luck was still there, I would take a chance on him. According to these rankings, I'm overdrafting him by 8 spots because he was ranked as the 69th best player. But I mean, if you give me the opportunity to go ahead and pick Luck here, especially with how the rest of the available players were playing out, I wouldn't be too mad at that. I guess I could have also picked Devontae Adams, but that's getting that's getting excessively Packer happy, having pretty much the entire Packer offense except Aaron Rodgers. Now, at this point, I would start looking for a flex. There's a guy like Brendan Marshall who I would not mind having. And maybe you could make the argument I should have taken him over a guy like Andrew Luck because the quarterbacks after Luck are still very quality. I'll scroll to that screen right now. And you have Russell Wilson, Cam, Dak, Kirk, Derek Carr, Big Ben, Jameis, Phillip Rivers, and even Marcus Mariota. Some of the guys, out of the guys that I just named, Russell Wilson, I wouldn't have picked at 61 because I think he's too spotty. I don't know what's going to happen with that Seattle offensive line. Cam Newton, he's going to have a reduced role as a runner, so he automatically becomes less valuable coming back from injury and offensive line questions. Dak, I've said it before, the only way I pick Dak would be if I have Zeke as well. Then Kirk, for me, Kirk is, I just don't like the situation in Washington, the weapons that he has. For Derek Carr, again, I wouldn't mind Derek Carr. I don't know if he's a good quarterback, but you know how you can have those good quarterbacks that aren't just necessarily good fantasy quarterbacks. And I'm kind of on the fence about Derek Carr being that good of a fantasy quarterback at this point. I think you can look at that with guys like Eli Manning. Sometimes he'll have amazing weeks, but then sometimes he'll be very average, even though he's a great quarterback. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion, so keep that in mind. I honestly, right now, later on in the draft, I usually like to draft 2 quarterbacks and not wait for the waiver wire to come around. I would have picked, my pick would be Phillip Rivers, just letting you guys know, because I'm not going to wait that long to make that selection. And the reason for that is I personally value Phillip Rivers a lot, but I love that quarterback running back combo, especially for guys that have that PPR edge in the running game with Melvin Gordon, because there's nothing I hate more when you get in the red zone and you have instead of your quarterback just handing the ball off to the running back, just dumping it off to another running back and then getting and then missing out on that 7 points. But that probably won't be the case now. Danny Wood had gone, and this way I would get a double bonus because I get a touchdown from Phillip Rivers and Melvin Gordon. Obviously, I wouldn't start Phillip Rivers over Andrew Luck unless Andrew Luck is on a bye, something like that, or he just has a bad matchup, injuries, things like that. But if I had ended up with Phillip Rivers as my starting quarterback, I wouldn't have been that mad either. Let me re-examine the players that have gone since I've been talking. We had Devontae Adams go, Willie Snead go, Martellus Bennett go, Spencer Ware go. Brendan Marshall was the guy that I was looking at. Unfortunately, he's gone. Tyler Eifert, Kelvin Benjamin, Russell Wilson, Jimmy Graham, some of the bigger names. I'm personally not that high on Kelvin Benjamin. I pay attention to the Panthers a decent amount, and there's too many reports about him having issues with his weight, with conditioning. I personally think he's kind of slow, which worries me. I don't trust Cam that much, and there's a lot of new guys on that offense that I feel like they're going to want to target. So keep that in mind when you're drafting Kelvin Benjamin. Right now, I'll probably go ahead, make these 2 picks, and call it a day in terms of my drafting at least. But I'll go ahead and review this team afterwards. So looking at who I would pick here, I would go flex option. So Deshaun Jackson, not a bad option, but I don't think he'll be that PPR guy. I think he'll be more of a long ball kind of target. But when it's all said and done, that's not too bad. I just want to scroll through a little bit some of these available players. And yeah, I actually might go with Deshaun Jackson, just because even though he's not that PPR kind of guy, I could roll the dice on him. And what I'll actually do is I'll go ahead and pick Deshaun Jackson, and he'll go in as my flex guy. But a guy that I'm kind of high on, that really had a pretty good campaign towards the end of the year, is Thielen. And I just saw a report that he had a left knee issue, but I haven't heard anything serious about it. I think he's a good value pick at this point. If I at this point didn't want to pick him, I'd probably go ahead and pick a defense like the Broncos defense. I'm not sure if they're available or not, but that's who I would pick, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm a big fan of rounding out my team. But with that, I'll put myself on auto pick, and kind of look through my team and give you my analysis. So with Andrew Luck, I get a guy who I ranked as a top 3 quarterback, who I got in the 6th round, I believe. Melvin Gordon, I have as a top 5 running back. Ty Montgomery, I have as a top 15 running back in terms of PPR leagues. Jordy, I have as a top 5 receiver. Keenan Allen, I have as a borderline top 10 receiver. Travis Kelce, I have as my number 2 tight end. So I'm ecstatic right now with this lineup. My main issue is that a lot of these guys share a team, which I'm not a fan of. But as far as pure talent and on-paper ability, this is probably the best team that I've put together in a while. Now, personally speaking, in most situations, I don't see Melvin Gordon being available with the 12th pick overall. I don't know how that worked out for me, but I'm not upset with it. I also don't see Jordy Nelson necessarily being available with that 12th pick. But this was just how things broke, and I'm definitely a fan of how things broke. I can maybe scroll through some of the other available players later on, or additionally, I can also scroll through the other teams and their respective picks and kind of do a little side-by-side comparison of how each team turned out. I don't know how valid it'll be considering a lot of these guys went on auto pick, and I don't know how their draft strategy was. But I might actually add that as a separate video in a continuation of this one. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up. And as always, leave me some comments. Let me know what you think, whether I had a good selection of guys, and whether you would have gone with someone else, and what you would personally grade this draft. I'm really happy. I give this draft, honestly, an A, borderline an A+. Maybe keep it an A because of the issues that I mentioned, but let me know what you guys think, and I'll be sure to keep these videos coming. Thanks.